All right, folks. I figured I'll get in here a couple of minutes early. This is my first time using the StreamYard service to do a live cast on both Facebook and YouTube. So we shall see how it goes. I see Mr. Slavgans is here already, always on time. Okay. Howdy, gentlemen. Mr. Schnicken and Joe. I'll give it a couple more minutes and then I'll start talking about the scopes. So the way Nick, I'm always serious. Didn't you know that? There's a whole swath. Oh, please, Joe, don't start me on that. Okay, let's do this, guys. So I'm in a couple of minutes. I will start talking about scopes and what I want to do. Please comment, please ask questions in the comments. I'm not going to address them for a few minutes until I kind of give you an overview of the two scopes in question of the Schmidt-Bender Dual CC and Vortex Razor Gen3. I've got them both here. I grudgingly took them off of my rifles. I don't like taking them off my rifles. That's where they belong. Yes, Max, I know people hate starting early, but it's the first time I'm using this thing, so I figured I should get on it and bullshit for a few minutes. So there are some. Mr. Joe posted this comment. Joe, I will be happy to address this comment, but a little bit later. Last time I did this, I talked for a long time. It was an hour and 40 minutes. So I was parched. Fu, if the Vortex makes your wallet afraid, you should not look up the price of the Schmidt-Bender. You really should not. And you should never, ever, ever look through it on anybody's gun. Just saying. Yes, Max, I am using StreamYard. It's actually working quite nicely. I'm pretty happy so far. I mean, the interface is good. Where was I? But anyhow, yeah. So this time I came prepared. There is what I believe to be the best rye whiskey in the world in this glass. And if you guys are nice to me and if you ask me good questions, I will tell you what it is at the very end of the live cast. And if you're not, if you don't like bourbon whiskey, just leave now. But I'm joking. You don't have to leave, but you should try this one. It's really, really good. And so that you don't think I'm an alcoholic, I also have a Pellegrino here. Because, you know, there's so many people who drink Pellegrino in Russians as opposed to whiskey. Alrighty, where was I? Yeah. So let's see. Okay. So I guess before I talk about the specific scopes, I might as well give you a little bit of an introduction to low power variable scopes. Okay, Fu. All right, I'm going to put this on the screen. There is nothing classy about me. Not a damn thing. Just so that we're all clear. And just for you. Will it be better if I go like this? No? California style? No? Okay. And I just pissed off everybody in California. Oh well. Anytime, Mark. So the reason I'm doing it this week is that I originally was going to do a live cast every couple of weeks, and I did one yesterday. Not yesterday, excuse me, last week. See, the bourbon is already working. I can't tie 3 words together. I did a live cast last week, and I was going to do one 2 weeks later, but then I realized that I'll be on travel next week. So I'm going to do one now, and the next one, depending on the topics, is going to be, let me pull up a calendar, either 27th of August or 3rd of September, depending on the response. I'm probably going to edit a couple of videos, so I still don't have my workstation repaired. Low class is a class. Yeah, I think I'm outside those boundaries. But anyhow, so my original plan was to do live casts a couple times a week and upload edited videos a couple times a week, but I still don't have my workstation. Lenovo is still working on it. So you might be seeing more live casts than I originally intended until I have the ability to edit videos again. Similarly, for the 2 scopes I'm going to talk about today, I have through the scope videos that I'm going to blend together so you can see the reticles and everything side by side. But I just can't now, right? So once what I'm going to do, I'll just talk about the scopes now, and then there will be one more video where I will show you through the scope look with the reticles and everything. Slav guns, Golden Eagle. I actually have a video on that. I looked at high magnification rifle scopes, I think a year or 2 ago when Golden Eagle just came out. And I liked it quite a bit. If you want to talk about it during this live cast, remind me in the end, and I'll go over the strengths and the weaknesses if you'd like. I spent a lot of time with that scope. Okay, so we are at 8:03. So let's talk about LPVOs. Like I said, I'm going to give a little speech here, some unprepared comments, and then after that, I will address questions, whether pertaining to the 2 scopes I'm talking about or about anything else. I'll even address Joe's Middle Eastern question. Before I do that, I just realized, so not all of the t-shirt is visible. I don't think I can jump up that high. It says this. So the story behind this t-shirt is that I live in New Mexico in Albuquerque, and my office, my day job, is in Dallas in Texas. And a couple of weeks ago, I was in Dallas visiting the office. Howdy, Derek. And I found this t-shirt on my chair in my office. None of my employees are fessing up to having it put it there, or at least having it made, but I do appreciate the sentiment. Anyhow, so let's talk about low power variable optics in general. This is arguably the class of an optic that's gone through the most development in the last few years since the popularity of the AR-15s. And since Schmidt and Bender, with its 1 to 4 power by 20 short dot, kind of redefined the category. You basically get a near red dot performance on 1 power and some amount magnification to extend the range. One thing that I see very frequently, people are putting low power variable optics on their ARs and AKs and then never use them on low power. They shoot at the range. If you aren't mostly going to be shooting at the range, if you're not going to be shooting offhand, standing, doing high speed stuff, low power variable optic may look cool, but may not be the best way to spend your money. The basic problem is that doing true unity magnification, true 1x, is not so simple in terms of optics and in terms of mechanics. There are some good reasons for it. I covered a lot of it in a video I did a while back on why LPVOs have small objectives. And if it's not clear, I can talk about it again. But fundamentally, one power is not straightforward. And low power variable optics, first and foremost, have to work well on one power, and everything else is gravy. And what happens with a lot of budget low power variable optics, budget LPVOs, is that they're optimized quite well when you have a little bit of magnification, but on one power, they're not great. And that is sort of a cardinal sin. If you're buying a scope of this type, first and foremost, one power should be where you spend a reasonable amount of time. Even with scopes as fancy as these guys, like the 1:10 Razor Gen3, this thing, even with scopes as fancy as these that offer me good magnification, good performance at range, for at least half of my use of this thing, I'm on one power shooting standing and trying to go fast. If I was not doing that, I would not run this scope because one power is important. Okay. And the important thing is the field of view has to be wide, the illumination has to be bright, or the reticle has to be very, very nicely visible, so you have a well-defined aiming point. The field of view has to be as distortion-free as possible. Okay, and optical performance has to be generally good, and the scope has to be easy to get behind. Okay. Joe, that's actually a nice scope. I'll address that a little later, but it's slightly a little bit of a different beast. So that's the idea behind LPVO. And then you go up to high magnification. Originally, it was 1:4. There was at least one 1:3 scope, then 1:6. Now it's 1:8 and 1:10. And in all of those cases, when you're looking at a low power variable optic, right, the first question you need to ask yourself, how good is it on one power? And for those cases when you're not on one power, how much magnification do you really need? Okay. Everything else comes out of that. There are downsides to having a rifle scope that has a large erector ratio. Erector ratio. Good question, Max. I'll address that. If you have a high erector ratio, with many designs, the downsides, the casualty of having a large magnification ratio is the size of the exit pupil on one power, right? It is not uncommon to see scopes where with similar quality, a 1:4 will have a 10-12 millimeter exit pupil on one power, and a 1:8 will have a 6-7 millimeter exit pupil on one power. A good example of that actually is with two Night Force scopes, Night Force Attacker 1:8 and Night Force NX8 1:8. The cheaper and smaller NX8, although still expensive, has a smaller exit pupil on one power, and it is harder to get behind. Okay. Okay. Nick, I'll address that later on. So where does it leave us? If you are looking for a scope with high magnification ratio, you will probably spend some money. Although there are some coming up in mid-price ranges that are actually quite good. I named this live cast LPVO royalty because the two scopes in question here, the Schmidt & Bender and the Vortex Razor Gen3, are really, really, really good. But they're also very differently priced. The Gen3 is around $2,000. The Schmidt is 4.5, 4.3, and so it's a ridiculously expensive scope. The way it seems to be working out with low power variable scopes, anything that clears the $2,000 mark approximately is pretty much easily within this LPVO royalty range. And these scopes, I've seen them all at different times with different amounts of time. With these two, I've spent a lot of time. I think I'm sort of friendly with the guys in Schmidt & Bender. They're probably going to order a hit on me soon enough if I don't return the scope, but it's really difficult to let it go. But The scopes I'm talking about are, well, the Razor Gen3 and the Schmidt & Bender that I have here, the Nightforce Max, you are home. Okay, I'm gonna bring this one up. Max, the idea behind YouTube and Livecast is that you are home. Have you started drinking earlier than I have? Man, that's just shameful. But anyhow, so the Nightforce Attacker 128 definitely belongs in this category. Leupold CQBSS 1.1 to 8 by 24 does. Blazer 1 to 7 by 28 in many ways one of my favorites. Minox ZP8 1 to 8 by 24. So I have pretty good familiarity with all of these. So in the end, if you're trying to make a decision, if you want more details on how different ones compare, please ask. I'll be happy to walk you through it. But for now, let's talk about these two, the Schmidt and the Vortex Gen3. First, the obvious is the size. So the Vortex has a built-in sunshade that now has a dent in it, and the not a built-in screw-on, and the Schmidt. Let me see. I'll get back further. The image is reversed, so I'm kind of struggling with this. And the Schmidt. Hey, Smith. And the Schmidt has a built-in sunshade. So the objective lens in the Schmidt is not up front here. It's actually kind of here's about an inch or so of built-in sunshade, and which always helps. But in terms of weight, they're very, very close. They're within an ounce of each other. But if you're running a clip-on or anything like that, the Razor is a shorter overall scopes. Derek, if you think that once your kids move out, you can afford this one, you should look up how much it costs. But anyhow, they weigh about the same. I think they are about 21, 22 ounces. So these are not lightweight scopes. If you're outfitting a lightweight carbon, this is probably not the scope for you. In terms of features, both of these are extremely full-featured. Pretty much the only feature that the Schmidt has, external feature, that the Vortex does not. Schmidt has exposed but locking reticle. You can see that it says locked, and if you pull up on the ring, unlock, and this is a wonderful single turn reticle. It's really good, very nice design. On a Vortex, the turrets are covered, although under the cover, they are finger adjustable with a very, very nice feel, and I actually like this turret a lot. But I will be honest with you, both of the scopes have front focal plane 3 reticles, and I don't really have any intention of adjusting the turrets very much, although I can. I have that ability if I need to, and optically, both of these are good enough to shoot pretty far out. So if need be, I can use the turrets or use the reticle or use a combination of the turrets and the reticle, and for longer distances, I do that. The Vortex comes with a cattail. The Schmidt also comes with a cattail, but the way the magnification ring is on this one, I did not install it because it's really quick and easy to grab with gloves, without gloves. But it comes with a cattail. It's in a box. I just didn't install it. All right, so I'm going to show this comment. That is not correct. I am both, and I will come back to this and explain what I mean. This is a simple sounding question, but it's not such a simple answer. Both of these scopes generally are designed to do most of your distance shooting out to, let's say, 800 yards, 600 yards or so with the reticle using holdover. And when I publish my through the scope reticle videos, you'll understand why. But both of them have 3 reticles. Before I get into reticles and optics, mechanically in my use, Both of these have been absolutely excellent. I had zero problems with them. I was not kind to these guys. I've dropped them, I've thrown them, I've moved them, I've dropped them with the guns. I've done a ton of things. Both of them, for comparison purposes, are sitting in the same type of mount. There's a mount called the odd mount, AADMOUNT, which is overall my favorite mount, although right now they're kind of scarce. I think it's a COVID-related issue. In the same mount, both of these scopes have been absolutely bulletproof. Now it's a sample of one, so it doesn't say all that much, but anecdotal evidence is still evidence, right? I wouldn't make too many conclusions out of this, but these scopes did not give me any trouble. And also these scopes have not had any issues with hysteresis of any sort. Turrets tracked. I did check tracking, although I don't plan to dial with them very much. Everything was just about perfect. I was really very impressed. The difference in magnification range is not that big a deal. Schmidt is a 1:8 with a 30mm tube. A Vortex is a 1:10 with a 34mm tube. There is this sort of a common misconception about magnification ranges where people look at the difference between 8 and 10x. So, and I say, oh, the difference is 2x. It's a big difference. It's not. Magnification, excuse me, is multiplicative, right? 10 is 25% bigger than 8, but 8 is 33% bigger than 6, right? And 6 is 50% bigger than 4. You have to divide numbers, not divide, multiply, not add, subtract. So there is a bigger difference between 6 and 4 than between 8 and 10. And for practical purposes, with these two scopes, while Vortex does have more magnification, it gives a little bit more flexibility. Weirdly, it is more useful at closer ranges than longer ranges, and I'll explain why. A little bit later when we talk about optics and Erectra system. But mechanically, both of the scopes have been robust. All controls are nice and smooth. Nothing is overly stiff. They've just been wonderful. Before I talk about optical qualities, let's talk a little bit about reticles. The reticle arrangement in these scopes, in terms of how they're built, is quite different from each other. Vortex has a front focal plane reticle with a diffractive illumination system. There's a Swiss company called IMT that makes these for a bunch of people, including Schmidt and Vortex, and Night Force and all of those. And the way it works, if you look carefully, there is this little etching in the center of the reticle, and that's what gets illuminated. With a diffractive reticle, you can have very little, if any, forward signature, and very bright dot illumination. It's basically one comparatively small dot illumination going back. The illumination in the Vortex Razor is a small centered dot, and it's kind of a segmented circle, donut if you wish, around it. And that is what makes it work well. Oh, good for you, Ramsey. And one of the things that makes it work well is that segmented circle, because what happens is that when you are on high power, you have a dot and circle arrangement. It occupies some space, but you still have reasonable precision. But when you're on 1 power, that dot, donut, whatever you want to call it, looks like a big bright dot. And this thing is bright. It's nuclear bright. I mean, it's not going to sear an image in your retina, but on a bright New Mexico day, I can't lose it if I tried. This thing is bright. Okay. And on the other end of it, there is enough dynamic range in the reticle illumination where at night, on low power, I can comfortably use it. Don't know offhand if it's low enough for night vision, but I would not be surprised, but I need to check. Schmidt, while also using this diffracted illuminated reticle, has taken a different and, in terms of construction, a more complicated approach. And what that complicated approach is, Schmidt has 2 reticles. Vortex only has 1 reticle in the front focal plane, right? in practical terms, if you look at the scope, the reticle is kind of right under the front of the turret. So maybe just a little close to the center, but it's right under here, like here. Okay. Schmidt has two reticles. One is right here somewhere, and another one is right here somewhere. And what that does is, in the front focal plane, they have a very thin tree reticle that gives you kind of a 6 milliradians of holdover, which is very nice and perfectly appropriate for a scope of this type. And in a second focal plane, all they have is this diffractive dot. And when it's off, the dot is basically not visible. And when it's on, it's very bright, and it's a second focal plane. So in principle, this is a better arrangement than Vortex has, but it's much harder to build. And that's one of the things that makes this scope as expensive as it is. The potential downside, at least to me, is that because the only thing in the second focal plane is this diffractive thing where that is not visible until it's illuminated. What happens is that if you own 1 power and your battery dies, there is no edged reticle to see. You see nothing. It's a completely clear field of view. Okay. Okay. Yes, I actually talked to the gentleman on the phone a little bit. I'll address this a little bit later in the live cast after I'm done with the overview. So, where was I? Yeah, reticles. So, with the reticle illuminated, the Schmidt is as close as I've ever seen a scope be to an aim point. The only thing that's as close is probably the Blaser Infinity, I think is what they call them, Blaser Infinity 127 by 28. But that's a hunting scope that has a symbol number 4 with a brilliantly illuminated reticle. If that scope had a more sophisticated tactical reticle, that would give anything a run for its money, right? I was curious, so I took the Schmidt and I did some shooting with it with the reticle on 1 power with the reticle not illuminated. And within 20-25 yards, I can just, from plates, man-sized target, I just put in the center field of view, go fast, blast it, and I can hit my target. But it's not ideal. The Razor Gen3 reticle is also kind of small on 1 power, but there are visible marks. There are 2 that come in from the sides and 1 from the bottom. And the center is kind of empty, but it's easy to bracket things between those things. And with the illumination off, on 1 power, Razor is easier to use. Okay. On the other hand, the way Schmidt is built, it actually has 2 different illumination systems. I don't know if you'll be able to see this. Let's see, how do I show it here? Right, on the Schmidt, if you turn one way, it's illuminating of the second focal plane reticle. If you turn the other way, it's illumination of the front focal plane reticle. So if you want to use more of the reticle in low light, you can illuminate front focal plane reticle. That's the more conventional illumination method, where you have faintly lit vertical and horizontal lines, and you have lead, and you have all sorts of stuff. So it is ultimately a more flexible way to go. But the downside is that if your battery is dead on low power, excuse me, you are kind of screwed. My throat's getting parched. Yeah, that's my excuse to have bourbon. Not bourbon, excuse me, rye whiskey. In terms of the battery life, honestly, I've shot these scopes a fair bit, but I'm kind of careful with turning the battery, the illumination off. And I've had them for a few months, and I am on the second battery with both of them. And I ran them into the ground, and then I changed the battery. Joe, no, never. It's not red dot lifetime, not even close, right? On an aim point, the or similar high quality red dot sites, your battery life is measured in tens of thousands of hours. On these, if you're going full blast, it's probably tens of hours. I didn't need to go full blast all that much. Full blast on a lot of this is really full blast, right? In practical of actually being turned on, I probably got 200-300 hours out of each, but that was a combination of daylight and low light and medium light and a little bit of everything. The moral of the story is have a spare battery. But I will say, so this not having an edged reticle to see on 1 power is almost the only weakness that the Schmidt has. And that was pretty much my feedback to them. I know they got some feedback from some other people that they could have used the dot to be brighter. Brighter is always good, but I did not have that problem. My only real criticism of the Schmidt is that I would like to see some sort of a simple reference for a reticle reference on 1x if the battery illumination is dead, which is how good this scope is. Honestly, I can nitpick everything. I found almost nothing to nitpick on the Schmidt and about as much to nitpick on the Razor. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, right, if money is no object and you can live with, this reticle arrangement on 1 power, get the Schmidt, spend the money. It is the best right now. I've seen nothing better in this class. And for the money, even though the Razor Gen3 is expensive, I think for the money, it is the best full-featured LPVO on the market right now, and I can explain why. Optically. Okay. All right. I'll stop and address this one. What one do you prefer in combat situation? I do not. In a combat situation, I strongly prefer to call in artillery and air force to support me. Okay. The only kind of a combat situation that I'm personally willing to be involved in is the one where I know I'm in combat and the other guy doesn't. Okay. So that's pretty much that. I am not a soldier. I am not in combat. Both of these optics are combat worthy. And on an off chance that we've got a Boogaloo going, I would feel quite comfortable taking both of these on my gun. And quite a few others, to be honest with you, right? I'm kind of splitting hairs here. Jared, so I have these in an odd mount. I'll put it in the comments. It's a weird spelling. Unfortunately, they're a little bit scarce right now. So they're kind of difficult. They're difficult to procure, but as far as I'm concerned, these are the best overall mounts. Okay. All right, I guess we're addressing question. What kind of drones exactly do you want me to review, Joe? The ones that I have some familiarity with professionally, I cannot review. Not allowed to. All right. Optics. Both of these scopes are excellent. They're both excellent, not just for the money, they're just excellent. But Schmidt is better. Field of view on both is quite flat and not terribly distorted. Razor has just a little bit at the edges. Schmidt is just flatter. Contrast is just a little bit better. Is it a big difference? No. Will you see it if you're not looking for it? Maybe yes, maybe no. Will you see it if you are looking for it? If you know what you look for? Probably. Resolution of both is very good. I think Schmidt has a little bit of an edge in contrast. Both have very good flare control. Both are very good in low light. Although Schmidt does have an edge in low light, as contrast scopes usually do. It should be. It's more than double the price, right? So it's kind of interesting, right? Because I'm talking about these two scopes and it looks like a comparison. They will be, Nick, I'll address this later. I'll come back and go through the comments. So it's, They're both excellent scopes, and it looks like I'm reviewing them. And when talking about optics, you will hear me say again and again that, oh, Schmidt is all better, Schmidt is all better. Yeah, it is a better scope. If you're asking me which one is better for the money, get the Razor. All right. If you ask me which one is better, no holds barred, get the Schmidt. But they're both really, really excellent, and the difference between them is almost academic. Not entirely academic, but almost academic. They're just two excellent scopes. So, okay, this is relevant since the IR bleed in low light and high setting. Not in the way you think. So IR bleed, illuminated reticle bleed, is generally something that happens with conventional illuminated reticles, where you have an edged reticle and you're bouncing light off of it. With these, the reticle works in a different way. It is a diffractive thing, so there is no bleed. But it can bloom because it is so bright compared to your environment that your eye will start having some spillover in retina. So bleed, no, but you can run it too bright. I would not recommend it. If you run it really, really bright, you may have some additional reflections from inner surfaces and not that, but it's not the same thing as a light bleed on conventional reticles. Okay. Anyhow, going back to the optical quality, one of the things that really makes a difference for how you see the image at different distances is depth of field. And all scopes of this type have slightly shallow depth of field, otherwise it starts getting huge. There are optomechanical reasons why that happens. And another thing that affects the perceived depth of field is the distance at which it is set parallax free. The Vortex is the one I have is set to be parallax free at 150 yards. And I know that it is 150 yards because I asked the guy who set the parallax for me. However, I'm probably going to go visit Vortex when this whole Corona nonsense blows over. And I'm going to have them set the parallax at a longer distance. And the reason for that is fairly simple. For tactical type shooting, I will not be using 10 power at very close range. And for example, if I set the parallax at, I don't know, 300 yards, and because of that, when I'm on 10 power, I have half an inch or inch or so of parallax, half inch maybe. At 100 yards, I don't care. This is not a bench rest gun. But what I do care about is maintaining more of what I'm looking at in focus at longer distances, because if you're buying a 1:10 scope, that means you're trying to cover the entire range from up close to really far away. Let's define really far away, for example, as 1,000 yards. And I've shot with both of these scopes at 1,000 yards. And with a parallax set at 150, once I start getting beyond 800, it's not so much that I start picking up parallax, but the image focus is not quite entirely there. And I would like, but if the parallax was set at 300, I did some back of the napkin calculations. If the parallax was set at about 300, I suspect that the image focus would remain fairly optimal out to about 1,100 yards, which is just about right for me with this scope. If you look at the reticle in the Razor Gen3, it's basically this kind of tree-type reticle that extends down to about 11 milliradian. I don't know why they chose 11 milliradian, but it is very likely because on a 18-inch barrel or thereabouts 308, if you are shooting to 1,000 yards, you need about 11 milliradian of drop. I did most of my testing of these two scopes on a 6.5 Grendel, which is supersonic at 1,000 yards where I live. I live at a little bit of an altitude, and I shoot at a little bit higher altitude. And I spent quite a bit of time with the 77 grain 556 with both of these scopes, which is a legitimate 800-yard cartridge. And what I found with both of these scopes, the way they are set up right now, once I start going beyond 800 yards, it starts losing focus. I can still comfortably make the shot. It's not a problem, but it's no longer optimal, and I want it to be optimal. In general, so the with the vortex, since the reticle is in a front focal plane, there's really only one parallax setting. However, with the Schmidt, there are two. The Dual CC scope, it has this, I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but I will try. So if you look on the magnification ring, it has the CC setting. And then if I rotate it a little bit, it starts going magnification. And you hear this little click when you transition between 1.1 and CC. And what happens, the scope changes the preset parallax. So if you're at 1.1 or higher magnification, the parallax on this particular scope is set at 100 yards. And when you're on a CC setting, it changes to 7 yards. They did this for room clearing, and it works, and it's amazing, and it's wonderful. However, on 1 power, given fairly generous depth of field, 7 yards doesn't make that much difference to me, but it's fine. But on high magnification, I also would like to have a longer focus setting, and I'm not the only one apparently who thought so, because Schmidt actually offers this from the factory with a 250 meter, which is what, 260 something yards, parallax setting. And if I were buying one, I would buy it with that parallax setting, because for longer distances and high magnification, it matters. There is this thing, people think that to shoot very far away, you need a lot of magnification, and that is generally not the case. It's definitely not in the hotter climates where I live, simply because the air conditions will seldom allow you to shoot on high magnification very far away. Even with my precision scopes, I spend a ton of time on 12 to 15 power. So 8 power, 10 power, and scopes as nice as these can actually let me reach way out there, and I want to be able to use that. Conversely, because it's not a bench rest gun, I don't terribly care about shooting off a mosquito's left testicle at 77 yards. That's what I have other guns and other scopes for. Okay, so with both of these, I suspect you may have an option to reset the parallax distance to something longer, and me personally, I'm probably going to do that. And when I'm going really fast, and image happens to be very slightly blurrier than I'd like, I will not know and I will not see the difference. As long as the reticle is nice and bright, and I see what I'm shooting at, and I'm going fast, that should be totally fine. Okay. Anyhow, so that's the reticle and the optics, and let's see. So in terms of the general overview, that's largely it, I think. And if you guys, I'm gonna go through the comments and I'll answer your questions if you have any more. If there's anything I skipped, please let me know. Like I said, unfortunately, I can't edit videos yet. Otherwise, I'd find a way to insert the reticle video. But so I'll do that separately, and I'll give you a little bit more overview on the reticles, themselves. All right, I'm gonna go back up through the comments and see if there's anything that I have not addressed in the order in which they were received. All right, politics. So Israel and UAE are friends now. The worst kept secret of Middle East is that Israel and United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia have been talking, cooperating behind the scenes for the longest time. Not because they like each other, they don't, but largely because they have some common enemies that are dangerous to both Israel and Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates, primarily Iran, but also some of the crazier Sunni Muslim proxies. So now this is just becoming official, because what happens is that everybody's afraid that Iran is going to be empowered even more in terms of demographics and resources, educational systems. Iran is a much more powerful nation than Saudi Arabia is, for example. There's nothing there but camels and camels, oil, and U.S. Air Force bases, right? It's for UAE and Saudi Arabia and other similarly friendly Arab regimes, Iran is an existential threat. and Israel is not, and they all get this. Nobody likes it that Jews are there. Well, nobody likes it that Jews are anywhere. It's a common Jewish problem for the last couple of thousand years. Every 100 or so years, or thereabouts, somebody tries to exterminate us again, so we're kind of used to it by now. But Israel is not an existential problem for Arab states. Iran is. Israel, however, is a great resource for them and a very important ally, and I think you'll see this develop further and further. How the rest of the problems will work out, I don't know, but time will tell. All right, moving right along. Fushnikin, that Vortex makes my wallet afraid. It should. This thing is awesome. It is just awesome. And if your wallet shakes, thinking about the Razor Gen3, you should not look at the Schmidt. But if your wallet allows it and you are looking for a scope for an accurate AR where you want to shoot everything from up close to as far away as the cartridge will allow you, a Razor Gen3 is your huckleberry. It's a remarkably nice design. Okay. All right. So Mark Liu, thanks for doing this. I'm debating what to buy next. If you're still on here, tell me a little bit more about what you're deliberating, and I'll try to steer you the right way. But fundamentally, like I said, these scopes make sense if you plan to use your AR-15 beyond, I don't know, 300, 350 yards with reasonable regularity. If you're planning to do that, these are two of the best out there. True, like I said, LPVO royalty. Let's see. Slav Guns, Golden Eagle. It is a very nice scope. I liked it quite a bit. I have a video on Golden Eagle versus Delta Striker 5 to 50 by 56 and Citron S5 10 to 50 by 60. All three are nice scopes. In the end, when it was all said and done, I kept the Delta 5 to 50. I still have it here somewhere. And I use it for, occasionally when I try to do bench rest type stuff or just, short range precision, things like that. Golden Eagle is a nice scope. The one I had was very nice. I know some people broke some, and there has been some variability in optical quality, but it seems like they cinched it down. My biggest problem with the Golden Eagle was that it goes from 15 to 60. And where I live and where I shoot and where I lived and shot before, excuse me, there are days where I really need to go even below 15. And for me, that was just a little bit too much. I liked the scope enough that I bought it from Vortex when all was said and done, and I've used it quite a lot. But in the end, I sold it to a friend of mine who really liked it and needed a scope for this kind of application. And for my purposes, the Delta 5 to 50 worked better, partially because I thought that was optically slightly cleaner, though both of mine were quite good, but mostly because I don't need to go down to 5 very much, but I don't like scopes that start out above 10. I'm not a dedicated bench rest guy. I need a little bit more flexibility than that. I will say this. So the Citron S5 that has a dual speed side focus parallax was by far the easiest to achieve perfect focus and perfect parallax of all scopes that I've tried, because of their side focus arrangement. So it's definitely a worthwhile design. Okay. Joe, you have an old LOW built Weaver Classic Extreme. That's actually a really solid scope. If I remember correctly, that got 9x4 reticle with an illuminated dot. The dot was not hugely bright. It was an etch and fill type illumination, but it worked. And for a little while, Light Optics Works struggled with making a scope that would be really well corrected on 1 power. There's a learning curve there. So they had several models that went down to 1.5 and then 1.25. For a while, I had the Bushnell Elite 1.25 to 4 by 24, which was a related design. In terms of durability and build quality, this scope is absolutely excellent. On ARs, on dangerous game rifles, on all sorts of stuff, and optical performance was really good. It's a really nicely optimized design because it only has a 3-time erector ratio. 4.5 divided by 1.5 is 3. It's not a terribly difficult scope to build, not a terribly difficult scope to build well. And hopefully you bought it when Natchez was clearing them out. They were going for very little money, and they're just excellent little scopes. Like I said, if you don't need 1 power, or if you want to put this in like a classic Mauser for a classic look, this thing is excellent. Okay. Slev guns versus Alcan. So the Alcan that you're talking about, presumably is the Spectre DR, the 1x to 4x, or 1.5x to 6x. If you're talking about 1x, we're probably talking about the DR 1 and 4. Where's my Alcan? I had an Alcan here somewhere. I don't see it. Like I said, there's enough scopes here to confuse anyone, including me. Yeah. So the Spectre gives you 1 power and 4 power, and it's an excellent 1 power and it's excellent 4 power. Some early samples had a little bit of an image shift between 1 and 4, meaning your point of aim would shift a little bit, but they kind of got it worked out. The arms mount is not awesome, but the later ones are better, and now you can get adjustable levers for it, which is what I did with my Alcan. It works very, very well. The question between an Alcan 1 Spectre 1x 4x and a 1 to 4 LPVO is not so simple, except you can get a good quality 1 to 4 LPVO for less money. Where things get muddy is with LPVOs that go from 1 to 6 or 1 to 8 or 1 to 10. What happens is that with a 1 to 4 or even a 1 to 6, you will generally spend most time on 1 power on highest power, like I have a Delta Striker 1 to 6 by 24 here, and I spent some time on intermediate powers, but not that much. With a scope like a 1 to 8 or 1 to 10, I actually spend a lot of time on intermediary powers. I'm not always on 1 and I'm not always on 10. That is really why once you get into higher erector ratio stuff, I like to have front focal plane reticles, because I don't keep track of what magnification I'm on. And if I want to use a reticle at different magnifications, front focal plane allows me to not worry about the setting. I'll give you an example. So with the Vortex 1 to 10, I used 1 power for going fast. I was usually around 2.5 when shooting slowly offhand. I'm not the steadiest guy in the world, so when I'm shooting slowly offhand, I don't like a lot of magnification. The tremor bothers me. Normally, I'm right around 3 power on that. But one other thing that happens with this optical system is that people generally don't pay attention to this, but on high erector ratio scopes, as if you slowly go through magnification range, you'll notice there'll be 1 or 2 points where the reticle goes a little bit blurry, because the erector system is between you and the reticle, right? So on this guy, the reticle is right under here. The erector system is here. That's the eyepiece. Your eye would be here. So as lenses move in the erector system, if things are not perfectly optimized, there will be at least one spot where the reticle goes a little bit out of focus. And with the Razor, it's right around 3 power, I think, if I remember correctly. And all of them have it. And the higher the magnification ratio, the more visible this is. With the 1 to 6, if it does have it, it's such a mild thing that I can't catch it. With most 1 to 8s, it can, although with Schmidt, I can't quite see where it is. And your eye accommodates. With the Vortex, I can see it. So instead of being on 3 power for shooting offhand, I'm usually about 2.5. When shooting with it in low light, where I need some reasonable exit pupil, with my aging eyes and all that, I'm in my 40s now, I usually end up between 5 and 6 power with a roughly 4 to 5 millimeter exit pupil. And when I'm shooting further away in good light, I'm on high power, right? So I'm using at least 4 different magnification settings. and I use them all a fair bit, and that's why it gives me more than a dual power Alcan. Okay. All right. I hope that answers your question. All right. So I don't know how to pronounce this handle, but I know that the gentleman's name is Nick. So I am not gonna. I know you're not Czech. Why are there no vowels in there? But anyhow. So I don't know which Bushnell 124 you have, but if it's an expensive one, it's not the greatest scope in the world. Right now is a good time to be in the market for low power variable scopes. And if you want a little bit more magnification and good illumination and everything without spending a ton of money, your best bet right now is this Delta Striker 126 by 24. Ed Gun West is selling this guy for I think $740, something like that. And for that, it's a steal. It's a second focal plane scope. The reticle is nicely visible. It's milliradian delineated. Has a nice bright fiber optic illuminated red dot. Works great. If you have the funds and you want something that really does everything, get the Razor Gen3. It's wonderful. Or get the Schmidt if you can afford it, or well, not can afford it if you're willing to spend it. I think that's a better way of saying this. But there are many options there. If you have some specific questions, please post them in the chat or put it in the comments in the video later, and I'll try to address it the best I can. Okay. All right, Fushnikin, XTR2. Yeah, I ran that scope for quite a while until I got the Razor Gen3, and then I traded somebody the XTR2. It is a surprisingly decent scope. The glass is quite good. It is very, very robust. It is unfortunately heavy. I think it was somewhere about 24, 26 ounces, something like that. Reticle was reasonable. The reticle on the front focal plane reticle on the XTR2 is a BDC, which I don't like too much. If it was a millirad delineated reticle, I probably would have kept it. But it is a very, very nice and robust design. Unfortunately, since it is a nice and robust design, Burris and their great wisdom decided to discontinue it. So go figure. It is what it is. I don't make the rules, and I don't make corporate decisions. I know they've got something else coming. I don't know for sure what it is. But if you can find XTR2 for the money, if you want a front focal plane 1:8 by 24 scope, it is a very nice option. I've seen very, very few of these failing. All right, going through the comments. All right, Nick. So LPVOs tend to be chunky, yeah. The Razor Gen3, I think, is 21 ounces, and the mount is 7 or 8 ounces, so you're about 28, 29 ounces. It adds some weight. For a lightweight AR carbon, it's a lot of weight, but you also get a lot of capability. If you want a little more magnification, lighter weight, so the Striker is 17 ounces, so you're saving 4 or 5 ounces compared to the Razor Gen3 or Schmidt. The lightest decent LPVO is probably Leupold VX6 126 by 24. I think it's in a 15 ounce range. I think it's a couple ounces lighter than the Delta Striker, but it is a little more expensive, I think. If you're okay with a 1:4, and you might be okay with just a high quality 1:4, Steiner P4XI 1:4 by 24 is a good option. But one of the downsides of having a higher erector ratio is it's hard to make these scopes lightweight. All right, Mr. Slavgans, holdover guy versus a dialer. No, I'm both. Depending on the situation. If I need to engage multiple targets, I am likely to use holdover. If these targets are all fairly far away, let's say, I will dial to one of them, and then when I transition, I will use the reticle to transition. Generally given a choice for shooting plates, not for shooting groups, for shooting plates inside of 400-500 yards, I tend to use the reticle. I am faster with it, and I don't need to worry about getting the turrets returned to 0. That is one of the many reasons I almost never ever dial for wind. I don't like to look at turrets, right? And to return the windage turret back to 0, you actually have to look at it. There is really usually no real tactile mark to tell you where you are. With the elevation turret, if it has a 0 stop, I know how to get back to 0 without looking at it. When I am lined up behind a scope, I never want to look away. Maybe it's just me, my personal shortcoming. Maybe not. But I don't like to look at turrets. I like to go by feel. For precision, I use March scopes and tangent thetas, and they're wonderful for that. I don't need to look at anything very much. I don't need to change my shooting position. I don't need to worry about seeing the turret markings in questionable light. I don't need to do any of that stuff. So once distances really start extending, I dial more because then I have more time and I can do more things. At closer ranges, I use the reticle. One of the new-ish innovations that I really like, it's, for example, this guy. This is the Revic PMR. Optical, it's basically very similar to Vortex Razor Gen3, 4.5 to 27. This guy's 4.5 to 28 by 56. When I dial the turret on this guy, there is a little display inside that I can see through the eyepiece that tells me the setting of the turrets. And that makes all the difference in the world for me. That means I can continue looking through the scope and I never have to look away. All right, Ramsey, you got your Delta Striker 5 to 50. I'm glad you like it. Okay, so Slavgans, you were wondering about Vortex Golden Eagle. Ramsey's Delta Striker is clearer than his Vortex Golden Eagle. So there's another data point for you. I'm glad it works well for you. Reach the one. Okay. So on Sniper's Heart, there was a gentleman who I believe works for the Air Force who has been talking shit about Razor for a long time. So he called me. I had a long conversation with him, and the things he says make sense, kinda. But the problem is that I've seen a lot of scopes, and I have statistics on a lot of scopes, and that just doesn't agree with what he has seen. I know he's very friendly with some people at Night Force. So he's never seen a Night Force he doesn't like. But Night Force is not the only scope he speaks well of, and I'm pretty sure he doesn't have any close friends at SWFA, and he likes those scopes. So I don't know what to make out of that. But I do know that I talk to a lot of people, and other than him, I know one guy who says his couple of razors lost 0, and another guy doesn't. And when I started digging a little bit, for example, I saw there's the same gentleman from the Air Force, I believe. He said they had some drop issues. He would drop a rifle and it would shift 0, etc. But he dropped it in a, what's the name of that mount? Andrew, my mind is sleeping. But basically, it's a very nice, quick detachable mount, but it is spring-loaded. If you take a rifle with a scope on it and you drop it even on a soft ground and you have a slightly spring-loaded mount, there's a good chance it's going to shift 0. So I don't have anything super conclusive to say, but what he's saying does not jive what a ton of people I know, both doing this for a living for the government and hobbyists and competitive shooters, are saying, right? With 1 to 6 scopes and that kind of stuff, I know how many Swarovskis and Colossus have crapped out. They seem to be slightly more fragile, although statistically not as fragile as people say they are. Razor Gen2s have been good. And regardless of that, Razor Gen3, other than the name, does not really share anything with the Razor Gen2. And there are not enough of these out there to have any sort of a good grasp of durability and reliability. Mine did not give me any problems, and I tortured it. As more of them get out there, we'll know better. But you cannot make any conclusions about durability of the Gen 3 Razor based on the Gen 2 razor, other than it's made by a company that knows what they're doing and they stand behind their product. And very welcome. I am having a blast doing this, I'll be honest with you guys. Okay, I already answered this question, but I thought it would be important to bring that up again. No, never. Okay. Okay, Jared, I answered this one. It's the odd mount. There are many good mounts out there. The Striker is in the Geissele, which is quite good. There are quite a few others. I'm gonna do another video on mounts. If you have a specific question about a specific mount, and if I've seen it, I'll be happy to address it. But basically, any nicely stiff mount with horizontally split rings is your best bet. One of the kind of crude ways to see if the mount is flexing or not, when you are tightening the ring halves, between loose and tight, there should be very little rotation of the screws. And the odd mount goes from loose to tight faster than any mount I've ever seen. That means the ring halves are super stiff. That means they maintain their shape. One of the biggest problems with improperly made mounts, and I'll get to that with another question shortly, one of the biggest problems with improperly made mounts is that they're designed to flex. And when a ring half is flexing, as you tighten it, that means the pressure on the scope tube is not going to be even. Yes, and that means that depending on where you're clamping the tube, and depending on what kind of scope it is, and depending on whether you're going to dial with it or not, it may or may not work. Do not use mounts with flexible ring halves. It's just a bad idea. Don't do it. Okay. Okay, where I just saw this. I lost where I was. Give me a moment, guys. Okay. So, area precision ultralight scope mounts. They're not very expensive, so I was once curious and I bought like 6 of them, 30mm and 1 inch. They're shit. Don't use them on anything that you might be dialing. It's the same problem that I just described. It may work with some scopes. It works. Don't touch it. It should be fine. But by and large, every single one of these that I've seen, the rings are oval. They're not round. So they're squeezing the tube in a weird-ass way. And depending on, and you don't know where the optical elements are inside, where the levers are inside, where there's moving stuff inside, right? Depending on where those rings are and how hard you tighten them, you could be causing problems, or it might work great, right? If it's a set and forget scope and you verified it and everything works, use it. By all means, they're nice and light. But me personally, I've played with them and stuff, and I'm getting rid of them bit by bit because I don't really want to take the risk. All right. So, okay, I haven't answered this one. Jared, how do they compare to Delta, which I happen to have, and SWFAs? Well, they're better, but also more expensive. When you're looking to buy a scope, you really need to be very clear with how much money you're willing to spend. The more expensive scope will work better for you. Right now, with second focal plane designs, I think this guy is a sweet spot. Generally, the sweet spot's around $1,000. This one is actually cheaper because Delta is trying to get into the US. It's less than 800. Striker 126x24, that's a sweet spot for a second focal plane scope right now. As you go more expensive than that, generally you'll have a case of diminishing returns. If I was looking for a second focal plane 1-6, if I'm cognizant of weight, I'd get the Striker. If I could find a good deal, I'd get the Vortex Razor Gen3 and be done with it. And nice, they work well, they're affordable, comparatively speaking. With front focal plane designs, if you want a daylight visible, daylight bright, not just daylight visible, day bright illuminated reticle, this is your huckleberry. Open up your wallet, spend $2,000, and don't regret it. Okay. SWFA is a front focal plane, 1:6. It's a nice scope. It's exceptionally robust. Illumination is not super bright, but the reticle is visible. I was involved with the reticle design a long time ago. They're really nice scopes, but at this stage, I would probably want them to have a more modern reticle. But they work, and they work nicely. The problem is that for $1,000, it's robust, it works well. Like if you bought one, I would not dissuade you from buying the SWFA 1:6, but I'd be drawn to more feature-rich and brighter illuminated, more expensive scopes like the Razor Gen3. Okay. I hope that answers your question. Pantone Schmidt & Bender 1:8 DLC for $3,700. That is actually a good price. And you're right, Random, it is much better than 4,700. Look, 3,700 or 4,700, it's a very expensive scope, but it is the best. You know, it's one of those things when you're talking about the really, really no compromise rifle scope designs, it's never the best bang for the buck. It can't be, right? If you think about performance versus price scale as you go up, first the curve is pretty steep, right? A cheap ass Bushnell 1-4 for $150, or the Striker 1-6 for $740. The Striker is a better bang for the buck, although it's a lot more expensive. There's just so much difference in performance. Once you get past that inflection point, you get into a case of diminishing returns. But although the returns are diminishing, it is still a better scope. So look at your wallet, look at your spouse, figure out what's not going to get you divorced. And if you want the best, buy the best. Are you overpaying for performance? Yes, but there is extra performance. Okay. And 3,700 for this scope is a very good deal. Okay. Vortex versus the Attacker. Any thoughts? Yeah, quite a few of them. Attacker is a very nice scope, but and it seems to be robust. But one of the problems with Night Force word of mouth is that while they are well made and very robust scopes, Night Force has by far the most faithful fanboys of any brand I've ever seen in my life. It's remarkable. And so there are so few. To have an honest review of a Night Force, you pretty much have to look for somebody who bought one. It's kind of ridiculous. So it's kind of a love-hate thing. They make really nice products, but they have really stupid and really effective marketing. Per scope, they spend more on marketing than any other company out there right now in the optics world, right? So Vortex and Attacker are broadly comparable in many ways. Vortex Razor Gen3, I suspect, in many ways was configured to kick the attacker's ass, and in my opinion, it kind of does that. Durability is one thing we don't know. Attacker has been out for a little bit longer. It seems to be holding up very nicely. Razor Gen3 has not been out for as long, so we don't know yet, but so far seems to be so good. In terms of optical performance, Razor is a better scope. Resolution, contrast, flare control seem to be broadly similar. The reticles are broadly similar. Razor has wider field of view at every magnification, and that makes a difference in LPVOs to me. They're both pretty easy to get behind. They have similar size exit pupil, right around 10-11 millimeters. Same for Schmidt, right around 10-11 millimeters on one power, so they're easy to get behind. But Vortex is what, $700-800 less than the Attacker, and in my opinion, it outperforms it optically. Mechanically, everything works. Durability, I don't yet know. For my money, I'd go with the Razor. But if you bought the Attacker, I wouldn't sell it to get the Razor. The performance, other than field of view, is very, very similar. Razor Gen3 has, I think, about 10-12% more field of view, and to me that makes a difference with the way I use them. But it's the deal breaker now. If you're surrounded by people who respect you more because you have a Night Force, get the Attacker. For my money, I'll get the Razor. Okay. What yardage do you switch from thinking go fast versus long range high magnification? It's not a simple switch. I talked about it a little before. I kind of go through the magnification range. In practical terms, for me, fast is within 40, 50 yards. It's not terribly common for me to need to shoot fast beyond that. And that is really driven by the types of classes I take, really. In practical terms, when I practice, I shoot offhand inside of 100 yards a lot. But that is largely driven by the fact that I'm not terribly good in shooting offhand, so I practice. I spend close to 40, 50% of my shooting time shooting offhand on low magnification, going fast on 1 power, a little bit slow at around 2, 2.5, inside of 100 yards. I think it is a good skill to have. I'm not good at it. And so I practice. I'm not terribly inclined to go to higher, to 8 or 10 power until I'm at 300 yards and further on plates, right? Once again, this is not for shooting groups. I'm shooting 12 to 18-inch plates, and I'm not compelled to go to very high magnification until about 300 yards and beyond. Yeah, I have tested both Optical and GRSC. I have a video on that. If you look on my channel, you'll find one. They are decent scopes, but if your friend is trying to talk you into one over the XTR2, you need new friends. Okay. They are okay, but I had the XTR2 next to these, and it walks all over both the Optical and GRSC, left, right, and sideways. I am friendly with Ed Verdugo, the owner of GRSC. He's a good man and a good guy, and I like him a lot. And for the money, this is a decent scope. The guy from Optical is just a dickhead, so I don't want to give him any publicity. If you can buy XTR2 for anywhere within similar price range, do so. You make great pyramids now? Joe, you may want to clarify that. Or did you say that while I was talking about Israel, was that a reference to Jews building pyramids in Egypt? Yeah, that's the last time Jews did any manual labor. We mostly try to do law, medicine, engineering, that kind of stuff. Manual labor, meh. But they're still there, so we did okay. My comment got cut off, attacker versus Razor. I think I covered it to a good degree, Mark. If you need more clarification, please post in the comments. As I work through them, we'll talk about it more. Went to Israel a few years ago. Advice for Americans visiting. If you've never been to Israel, you should go. It's an amazing place. If you like history, it's something. So my wife is from Israel, right? So I have a lot of family in Israel. I grew up in Russia. I never lived in Israel. I came to America as a teenager. But part of my family went to Israel. I have a grandmother who lives there, just turned 100. And my wife's family is there. It's the only place in the Middle East where it's safe to go. And it has history left, right, and sideways. The people are generally friendly. Not always nice, but generally friendly. If you're young and single, it is an awesome place to go in the summer. Go to the beach in Tel Aviv. I never went to Israel single, so I missed out on that. But even my nerdy ass would have fun. So one advice I will give you, spend a little money and go on official tours. Israel takes tourism seriously, and their tour guides have to go to special classes in schools so they really know what they're doing and they really know the history. If you're Christian, go to Jerusalem on a tour, and the tour guide will be amazing. Spend a little money, go on different tours, go to Haifa, go to Jerusalem. Going to Eilat to the very south is less interesting. It's kind of a more modern place. You know, there's a coral reef there in Red Sea. If you like the beach, you'll enjoy it. But the important part, go to Jerusalem, go to Tel Aviv. Jerusalem is history, and Tel Aviv is modern. And go to Haifa, to the mountain where Elijah was hanging out. It's It's a very special place. Israelis have their rough edges, so be prepared for that. But if you've never been there, you should go. How do you like Burris XTR3? Mahmoud Shmateli, aren't you in Canada? I think you're in Canada. It promises to be a very good scope, but I have not done a full review because I'm waiting for the illuminated version. I looked at it. I was quite impressed with what I saw, but the reticle is quite thin, which is not my thing. And because it's quite thin on lower magnification ranges, it's not terribly usable to me. And that's something I just don't like. It's a personal preference, right? It's not a knock on the scope. So as soon as they have an illuminated version, I'm going to get my hands on one and do a proper, thorough review. Okay. Ramsey has 6 golden eagles and just got a delta and likes it more. There you go. So Ramsey has seen more golden eagles than I have. There you go. But like I said, I'm not really disagreeing because, of all the high magnification scopes I tested, I kept the delta. I really liked it. I don't have anything to add to this comment. I just wanted to put it on the screen because it's funny. I usually say in situations like this to shoot the left testicle of a mosquito, but shooting the ass off of a fly 300 yards, I think, is as good or better of an analogy. Jared, rimfire target optic recommendation. So when you ask me a question like this, you always want to add some sort of a price range because I can recommend a ton of stuff and I don't know. So SWFA, Leupold or something else. I don't think Leupold offers anything terribly interesting in this for this application at the moment. I like Leupold's newer designs, VX5, VX6s, and all that sort of stuff. They're older things, stuff I don't like very much. Once again, I'm friendly with the guys at Leupold. I might get some hate mail out of this, but it is what it is, right? It's SWFA 3-15 by 42. If you can find one in stock, there aren't a whole lot of them. They're having a very hard time keeping them in stock. Is just generally a very good general purpose rimfire scope for about $700. It focuses very close. It's optically okay. Mechanically, it's very good. It's just a good general purpose choice. That having been said, for close range targets where atmospheric conditions are not that critical, I often like to have a little more magnification. And one of my favorites right now is the Element Optics Nexus 5-20 by 50, which is a really well worked out scope that also focuses pretty close. I had it for a while in my air gun. Now it's in AR-10. Might try it in a rimfire. I've got a precision rimfire coming in for testing. So there are a lot of options. If you tell me a little bit more about how much you're willing to spend, I can be more specific. But SWFA is a good choice. Element Optics is a good choice. Honestly, if you like front focal plane stuff, I actually have the Element Optics scope here. I forgot it's here. I thought it was back on the gun. So Element Optics 5-20 by 50. It's kind of interesting. It's a new company. So I'm pretty friendly. The guys behind it, they're young, they're bright, they have a lot of energy. I think they'll do good things, and they're smart, which is important. For a first product for a company, this thing is absolutely remarkable, and it is remarkable in many ways because they didn't try to do anything terribly complicated. It's a well-performing, not hugely ambitious, but very well executed scope of reasonable weight. Absolutely excellent for the money. If you're in a $1,500 range, that would be my recommendation. If you're in a $600-700 range, SWFA is really worth looking at. Although, if you want more magnification, I really like Delta Strikers. So this guy, it's a Delta Striker 4.5-30 by 50. It focuses down to 25 yards. I had it on my Tikka T1X for a while. It performed really well. So there are good options. Tell me how much you're willing to spend, and I'll be more specific. Ooh, golf ball at 600 yards. You're a better shot than I am, my friend. Send me a link to the video once it's out. Okay. All right. What tools and methods do you use to mount your scopes? So much conflicting advice, maybe a video topic. Yeah, that's probably a good video topic. So in a grand scheme of things, I use caution and 20 years of experience. It is not rocket science. Don't be an idiot. Don't over tighten shit. The basic problem with mounting your scopes is that there's more than one way of doing this, and different people like different things, right? For example, on the lot of stuff that I shoot off handle, I often mount it with the reticle slightly canted. And the reason for that is that I want the reticle to be square to the world. And when I bring the scope up to my shoulder, the way my body is, the rifle will end up slightly canted, and I'll cant the scope to compensate for that, right? But then again, I have some guns where I can cant the butt pad, and then I'll mount the scope straight, and the butt pad is canted, right? So there is more than one way of doing this. But the single biggest problem I see with scopes is when people decide to tighten the screws farmer tight. That usually happens when they basically decide to tighten the first screw all the way to torque spec, even if using a torque wrench, then the next screw, etc. That basically crushes the tube. You kind of have to go through the screws one by one, little by little. Take your time, make sure everything is even, and you'll be fine. Make sure you use high quality mounts. Tightening it too much in a shitty mount is a recipe for disaster. Don't do it. Okay. Yeah, that's what it is. Well, you got me totally confused. It sounded like Czech to me with all consonants and no vowels. Okay, so current is a Bushnell Air Optics 1 to 4 by 24 BDC, non-illuminated. Well, you know what? That's actually kind of a decent scope, surprisingly enough, for the money. But yeah, you can do a lot better. Figure out how much you want to spend. Shoot me a message, and I'll tell you what I think you should go with. Still, so yeah, I'll do a video on AK optics. I've been thinking about that a lot, and I have some ideas. It kind of depends on what kind of AK it is and what kind of shooting you do. For a lot of AKs, really, a lot of AKs are really best served with a red dot. If you don't have astigmatism, well, it looks okay to you. And if not a red dot, then maybe a 1X prismatic. But there just aren't a lot of them for the AK. Primary Arms has one, few others. One of the problems with AKs is that a lot of them, the way the side mount works, too many different rifle scopes end up being mounted too high. Then the stock doesn't work quite well. You need to put a cheek riser, but cheek riser doesn't mean the butt pad is higher. So the handling of an AK goes to hell in a handbasket. So one of the main big challenges with AKs is mounting the scope at an appropriate height, and that's not such a simple thing. If you are shooting up close and personal, I put a Texas Weapon Systems mount and a red dot in Aimpoint or Holosun or something like that. If you're looking for a proper magnified optic to put in a side mount, the best side mount I've seen so far is by RS Resolute. And I'd put some sort of a fairly lightweight LPVO. For AKs, weight makes a big difference. And not just from a standpoint of total weight, but because the side bracket is long and it's a long lever. If you hang a lot of weight nut, it might not be ideal. I'd be looking at some lightweight Leopold like the VXR or something along those lines. But once again, kind of depends. Okay. Recommendation for youth hunting rifle: 243 bolt action range, 100 to 300 yards. Honestly, if I were getting a youth hunting rifle, that's not the caliber I would get. If I was trying to build a youth hunting rifle, I would get a Hoa, whatever the pronunciation is, barreled action in 6.5 Grandel and put it in decent stock. The 6.5 Grandel is an amazingly nice caliber for a youngster. It doesn't kick very much. It is surprisingly efficient. It puts down game really nicely. The action has a fairly short throw, and if the kid ends up being interested in shooting further out, Crandall is a legitimate 8 to 1,000 yard cartridge if you feel like it. 243 bolt action requires a lot of large action. The Hova and 6.5 Grandel is a shorter action, so bolt throw simpler. It's a little bit shorter. It's just a sleeker, more balanced design. There are two good micro actions for 6.5 Grandel or 7.62x39. One is Hova, another one is the CZ. I don't remember seeing the CZ available as an action, but the standard Grandel carbine, the length of pool, if I remember correctly, is a little bit too long for kids, and I don't recall they made the CZ 527 in a youth format. I would take a look. If you're comfortable in your stockings, buying separate stock and action, I'd go with a Hoa. If you want, I'm on the CZ website, I'll tell you right now. So rifles, micro centerfire, there we go. 527 American. Yeah, this guy has a stock that's too long for kids. Let me look, hold on. So I used to remember all this stuff, but yeah, it was a long time ago. Yeah, I'm not seeing a youth gun for kids. So let's see something else. Yeah, I don't think CZ makes their micro action with a stock that's short enough for kids. Otherwise, that would probably be my recommendation. They're very nice guns. Get the Hoa action and do so. In 243, if you insist on that, there are a lot of different choices. But once again, the basic problem is that 243, while it doesn't have a lot of recoil is comparatively snappy because it's a fast cartridge. So if you make a very nice lightweight youth gun, it'll actually kick a little bit, and kids should not need to deal with that. Weirdly, a heavy bullet of 6.5 Grandel moving slower may not technically have a lot less recoil, but it feels a lot softer. I would probably go with that. If you do want to get 243, I really like Tikos in 243. They've of the factory rifles, they've probably been the most consistent from what I've seen to date. Okay. So let's see, where are we? Okay, there we go. Side lock mount. Yes, I tested the side lock mount. It's a decent mount, but if you drop it at the right angle, it will shift 0. Oh, sorry, I didn't show the comment. They're very sleek, which I like. But like I said, all spring-loaded mount have a high risk of shifting 0 from lateral impact. Yes, thank you. So a lot of the testing that guy did with those scopes, I believe, had Bobro mounts, which are very, very nice. But if you drop it the right way, it will shift 0. What is your favorite booth at SHOT Show? I don't have a favorite booth per se. I've been going to SHOT Show for quite a few years, and I know a lot of people there. So for me, in many ways, SHOT Show is where I get to go and meet friends that I normally see once a year. So always have a blast going to Vortex because I've known Vortex since they were a very small company. So I have a couple of people that I've known for 15 years, and I like chatting with them. I always have a nice big booth, and it's always nicely done. So that's always good. But by and large, honestly, what I enjoy the most is roaming around the lower floor, where all the small companies are. The real innovation usually happens there. That's where, that's I have every time I go to the SHOT Show, I have a ton of appointments and things I need to do and all that sort of stuff, different write-ups and commitments. I always try to carve out some time to just go and roam around the small booths, the little guys. They are trying to get their moment in the sun, and they are usually there's always something interesting there, right? I don't go to SHOT Show to look at nice booth decorations. I'm trying to see new and interesting stuff, and the smaller booths usually do that for me. GLX mounts, no, never even heard of. I heard of GLX scopes. I never heard of GLX mounts. Primary Arms does not make their own mounts, to the best of my knowledge. They OEM them. Let me take a look to see if I can tell who the OEM is just from the pictures. It's loading. Oh, there we go. Okay, there we go. So Primary Arms GLX mounts look like they are. Looks like same style as Warn mounts. I don't know if they're made by Warn or not, but they have these highly contoured rings that leave a lot of empty space and all that. That's a stupid idea. Don't do it. You're just decreasing your clamping power and concentrating a couple of small spots. And the friction with which the rings hold the scope tube is directly proportional to the engagement area. And when you're carving out a bunch of metal from there, like they did with this mount, all they did, they made the ring halves weaker, so it's probably going to flex, and they cut down on the contact area. Just a bad idea. It looks good. Mole ninjas love it, but it's not a good idea. I would not do it. Okay. Ryan, how does 1x performance of these scopes compare to the NX8? It is better. NX8 is a very decent scope. It has a very bright reticle, but it's a little bit trickier to get behind on one power, which is to make significant degree is to a significant degree. I mean, that's a consequence of trying to make it small. Schmidt and Bender 1 to 8 has shit illumination. I don't know what you were looking at. I have one here, and illumination is very good. How's 1x on Razor Gen3? Excellent. I have some pictures on Instagram. You can see it. Easy to use, easy to get behind. Nice and bright reticle. I like it. GLX mounts look like Nikon black mounts. Yeah, quite possibly. Nikon black mounts were shit, and this one looks like it probably will be too. Oh, there you go. If you can get 50% off on the Vortex, so it's 50% off MSRP probably. So the Gen 3 is going to cost you like around what, $1,400, something like that. It's a good price. I would not hesitate to go for it. Yeah, so standard M7XI 4 to 28 by 56. I've looked at, I think, 4 of these at this point, 1 IFS and 3 without it. Really nice scopes. I talked to them. I did this review called High End Tactical. I did several of these articles. This was the 6th edition, and I talked about the M7XI. Nice scope. I liked it. I'm not crazy about the reticle selection. But with the MSR or MSR2, it is a very nice scope. The early versions had more chromatic aberrations than I like. But aside from that, I really like them. Good turrets, good everything. The version that interests me the most is the IFS, the integrated firing solution with a ballistic computer inside. I played with one a little bit and I liked it. I had to send it back. I'm going to get my hands on one more and really ring it out. I think that is one of the better integrations of a ballistic solution into a scope. And M7XI is a really nice platform for $3,000. It's one of the better options. Optically, I think the Minox is a little better, but in terms of mechanics and the magnification range and everything, M7XI has a lot to recommend itself. Hottest female soldiers. I assume you're talking about Israelis. Yes, I married one. All right. Slav, you've been to Israel. That's very good. Birthright, I don't know. So, yeah, also, you're almost as old as I am. I wonder when you went. Must have been a while back. Yeah, diving in Eilat is a lot of fun. Israel is a very entertaining place to go to. Some things will be frustrating, but by and large, friendly, warm people. It's and lots of history. If you're a history buff, Israel is awesome. What air guns do you have? So most of my air gun shooting right now is done with an FX Dreamline in 25 caliber. I really like that gun. It's freakishly accurate. I also have a Air Force Talon SS with 2 barrels, but I mostly shoot it with the 17. I mostly shoot it with a 17 caliber. I have what's it called? It's I bought a couple of those CMP underlever single shot 22 rifles. What were those? I think they were called Avanti. Now they're called Daisy. Also 17 caliber. They're kind of slow, but they're accurate. So I have one at home for offhand practice, and I have one in the office. My day job is kind of funny. I run a US division of an Israeli company that makes all sorts of optical equipment. And it's nice when your boss is 8,000 miles away. So I have a small air gun shooting range in the warehouse where I practice with that Daisy as underlever rifle. And I have a Chiappa FAS single shot air pistol that I shoot with a lot. At home, other than the air gun rifles, I also have a CO2 air gun that seems to work quite well for me. I shoot air guns almost every day. A lot of my practice is that, and then I go to the range once, twice a week. And there I primarily shoot proper firearms. Could I elaborate on the EOTech 5-25 Shorty? Yeah, so that was one of the scopes where I made some dire predictions and had to eat my words. I tested it. I saw that a little while back. I spent a lot of time with it. I really like that scope. It has a reticle problem, right? So if you want a 3 reticle, you're stuck with the Horus mosquito net, and I don't like Horus designs. I think they're crap. The version I tested was with an MD3 reticle, and I have a video on it. If you look at my channel, you'll see it, which is really nice, simple, well-designed reticle. And I really enjoyed that scope. It was freakishly compact, and optically above 20 power, it kind of suffered a bit. I think EOTech missed the boat when they made it into a 5-25 instead of a 4-20. Excuse me. Okay. If it was a 4-20, I probably would have kept it. There was some chromatic aberration. There are some downsides to making a scope that short. But given all those challenges, I think they did an amazingly good job. I have half a mind to start a company, approach Light Optics Works, and see if they can make me 4-20 by 44 or using that same basic optical design. I think that scope would absolutely kick ass. Another thing I didn't like too much is the whole eyepiece rotating. It's not my thing, but it's just a personal preference. Overall, that scope, for what it is, easily exceeded my expectations. Well, it depends on what you're doing with an LPVO, right? So most modern scopes have a fair amount of adjustment, and being a 20 mm MOA or approximately 6 mm retin away from center, with any modern, reasonably well-designed scope really does not make any impact on optical quality, right? But if you ever have to dial, it could come in useful. So it's not so much is there a reason to get a 20 MOA canned scope for a low power variable, but rather is there a reason to not get one, right? So what's the downside? When I, there are some mounts that are sent to me to look at and all that, and then I don't always get to choose. But if I buy a mount for myself, they all have 20 MOA canned because I don't really see a downside. Thank you, sir. I plan to. I'm enjoying this kind of stuff, and you guys come and ask questions. I'll keep doing this. Greetings it is. Ox goad 9mm. What the hell is an ox goad? You're gonna have to explain that to me. When will the Strike Eagle review be out? I recorded a video on the Strike Eagle, and then I mentioned in the previous livecast, I managed to drop my computer bag out of a car moving 40 miles an hour. I will not tell you how that happened. It's embarrassing, but every time I tell the story, it gets better. So in a year, it's going to sound good. So I lost my ability to edit videos, and I lost a bunch of just recorded videos. Lenovo is trying to fix it right now. I had warranty on that. So I do not know if they'll be able to recover the information of the SSDs or if they'll have to get me new ones. Once that gets back, I'll take a look and decide. If it takes them any longer, I might do another live cast talking about 700-800 scopes, including the Strike Eagle, and get information out that way. I'm just loath to re-record stuff until I figure out if stuff previously recorded has been can be salvaged or not. So stay tuned. I like that scope. Like I said, for $700, Strike Eagle has a lot to recommend it. EBR7 reticle is not my favorite, but it clearly works fine for a lot of people. It works fine for me, just not my favorite. Optical and mechanical, the scope's very good. There was an early mechanical glitch, but that wore in, so everything seems to be fine, and that's not an uncommon one. When in my proper review, you in my proper review, you will see it. Okay. Married an Israeli. Does she look like Gal Gadot? Well, she looks like a different Israeli actress named Ayelet Zurer. As far as I'm concerned, my wife is the most beautiful woman in the world. And I'm saying this knowing fully well that she will never watch this video, so I'm not brown nosing. But yeah, so Israel is an amazing place to go and see pretty girls, and also pretty and self-confident girls. I don't like meek women, never did, even as a kid. So it's kind of interesting. I've dated a few girls from Israel, and I finally married one. So go figure. See, 11 years ago, that is actually a pretty good time to go to Israel. Anyhow, anytime is a good time to go to Israel once flights open up. If it's somewhere on your bucket list, I suggest you go visit Israel before Iran gets a nuke, because it's a very small country and it's basically one good nuke and it's gone. So I suggest you go. Okay, care maintenance of a scope. Yeah. This is a good question. Honestly, so I'll approach this from a kind of a weird ass angle. What is wisdom, right? I like writing, so in my spare time, I'm writing sort of a book, a series of essays on politics and stuff like that, and I enjoy this kind of stuff. Every time I talk to politics, it doesn't make me any new friends. But I grew up in the Soviet Union, so I have some very strong opinions on this whole left-wing nonsense and stuff like that. And I just finished an essay that I called "Wisdom of Why There Is None of It Exists on the Left." And I expect to see people viewing this to just vanish. Wisdom is in my mind, in my opinion, is a combination of four things. You have to know stuff, you have to understand stuff, you have to have common sense, and you have to have humility. And honestly, care and maintenance of any optical device or non-optical device just requires a little bit of wisdom. Don't go crazy, don't do anything stupid, don't use weird solutions. Most modern rifle scopes, if you don't abuse them, will work just fine forever and a day without you needing to send them to the manufacturer. You really they're modern good quality scopes are well made. It's not common to need to send one unless it's been around for a long time. But for example, if you flood it with acetone that eats all the seals around the lenses, yeah, you will lose your purge and you'll have to send it out. If you routinely use it to hammer nails, yeah, you'll do something bad. I'll try to think through this and do a better video, but honest, a little bit of wisdom, a little bit of common sense, and a little bit of humility, as in, don't go crazy on this stuff, will take you a long way. Yeah, no budget. Go find some place to look at them, and then we'll see if your budget all of a sudden appears. Yeah, thank you. It was a major brain fart. I missed my laptop. Just spent $3,500 on a fancy Lenovo workstation. Used it for a month and destroyed it. Oh, that hurt. 56 to 3 target optic, 1000 or less. So for years, my sort of standard response to that was one of Citron S3 scopes. There are more options now, but Citron S3 6 to 24 by 50 or 8 to 32 by 56 should be at the top of your list. It is an excellent design. It will work very, very well for you. And just figure out what magnification range is within what magnification range you want. They're made in Japan by Kenko Optical. They're really, really well made scopes. They've made the same basic models for quite a long time. So they may not look fancy, but they know how to make them, and they are very, very good. You should. There is a new line from Swamp Fox Optics called Warhawk. These are Chinese. They look very promising, but until I test one, I can't tell you for sure. At the grand last for target optics, I'd probably look at Citron very carefully. Vortex PST Gen3 5 to 25 by 50 is a surprisingly nice scope. If you find Athlon Ares 4.5 to 30 by 56, that's a very good option, but they're usually in the $1,200 range. So, anyhow, look at Citron S3. I'd start there. Yes, Badger rings, Badger ordnance scope rings are among the best. I've never had a problem with one. I've used quite a few over the years. I use a lot of different mounts. Badgers are a very safe choice. Oh, good. So you bought the Striker 126. I'm glad you like it. I am extremely impressed with how good this scope is for the money and how good the scope is overall. So I'm friendly with the guy who runs Delta. I've designed some reticles for these guys. This particular reticle is not mine, but they asked my opinion. I thought it would work fine. It's for a Japanese high quality LPVO with a day bright dot. This thing is amazing. Probably the best deal out there right now. Red dot like optics. Any thoughts on see all open sites? Yeah, quite a few of them. How? I don't know, Joe. Do you speak Russian at all? I found over the years is that when I want to be really offensive, English really lacks the curse words. So in Russian, when I curse, I can basically use almost a completely different language with no interchangeable words. English, as far as cursing goes, is a fairly limited language. All jokes aside. So see all sites, they kind of work, but it is a problem looking for a solution, right? Well, excuse me, it's a solution looking for a problem. And I'm not sure anybody posed that problem, right? I don't understand what the advantage of that thing. So it doesn't need batteries, and it's slightly lower profile than most red dots. But you can do holdover. It's not that easy to get behind. And if you have aging eyes, it's a little bit easier to use than iron sights. But in a world where we have a ton of really nice compact red dot sights with long battery life, I do not understand why CO sights exist. Their mounts are shit. Their mechanical design is kind of quirky, and you cannot do holdovers. So I don't get it. It makes this whole CL side thing makes no sense to me. I have Gen 1 and I had a later tritium powered Gen 2 or 3, whatever the hell that is. Still have one somewhere, but I don't know. I don't like it. I don't think it's a good solution. I think we can do a lot better. Okay. I didn't say that you should. I asked that people do. Right, and I'm not going to disclose who, but I know. So what happens is that a lot of, I have some affiliate links and all that sort of stuff, right? So soon enough, I'll open up memberships. I've mentioned it before. I'll have another video explaining exactly what I'm doing. But one of the reasons is that I have some affiliate links. And it's very uncommon for people to buy anything through them, at least in terms of optics, because oftentimes if you call and ask nicely, many scope manufacturers will either give you, many retailers will either give you a discount, or they'll throw in some sort of a perk or whatever else, right? They cannot do this, they cannot advertise, they can do this officially because it goes under MAP, a minimum advertised price and stuff like that. But if you call on a lot of different brands, you do. Some absolutely do not allow any discounts, and some do. Right? Because I don't buy optics that way, I don't really know for sure, but I know people do it. So ask around, talk to your favorite retailer, and see if they're willing to play ball. What do you have to lose, right? Now, personally, I'd prefer if you use my link so that I make a cut. But like I said, it's not something I want to depend on, and it's not going to be your best price. Yeah, I need to look at it. The problem is that, so I'm friendly with the guys at Track. They're good people. What happens is that I'm kind of overbooked right now. I have a ton of stuff I still need to finish reviews on and publish them. And I'm not going to take on any new stuff until I do that. So I suspect that if I asked John to send me the new 34mm toric, he will. Like I said, they're friendly guys, and I really like their 4-20 toric, excellent scope. But the problem is the problem is that I just don't have time to take on new stuff. So my plan is to finish the stuff that I have on hand. And in the next batch of reviews, I'm going to look at the 34mm toric. Okay. Sensite, yeah, I remember that scope. It's I actually have some pictures of that. I used some pictures of that. So I just wrote an article for Guns and Ammo where I think the future of rifle scopes go, and I think I used the picture of that Sensite as one of the examples of electro-optic integration. It's not bad, but it has some problems. I haven't seen anything from these guys after SHOT Show that year. I don't know if they're still around, or I don't know. They had a lot of clever technology that has applications. So I don't know if they're still working on it, but they're doing more military law enforcement, or if they've completely shut down. I've seen a lot of startups try to do this. Yeah, hell, I might try to do a digital rifle scope. I think it's a good idea. But the way they did it was too much like an iPhone, too much crap in it, too many functions, too many different things. If you want a site that talks to your phone, gives you different reticles, does all sorts of other stuff, Maprolite has this site called Foresight. I have one that that has a lot of does a lot of augmented reality type stuff. I'd probably look there. Fully digital rifle scopes are coming. There are some good things happening out there, but not quite ready for prime time. Give it a year or two. So as I mentioned earlier, the mounts I have on this thing are odd mount. There are 4 T25 screws holding these on, and if this is a permanent installation, that is a very good option. Probably my favorite overall mount. That having been said, in general, under most circumstances, the mounts I like are more like this Geissele thing, where you have 2 half-inch nuts and I have little slots in them, so I can use a knife blade or something like that to remove it. I'm not big on most mounts with QD levers. Some are okay, some are not so great. But if you want really a nice accurate return to zero, your best bet is a mount like either with T25 screws or half-inch lug nuts, something like that, and a torque wrench. That will generally, if it's a good quality mount, that will generally return to zero better than anything with levers. I've seen a ton of different claims from LaRue and ADM. I don't like ADM mounts too much. The levers are okay, the rings are not great. From a bunch of different people. Burris's new Pepper signature mount, they claim quarter more return to zero, so I'm going to get my hands on one and check. I've seen a ton of these. For anything involving some sort of precision, I don't like levers very much. But that having been said, if you anticipate having to remove the mount a lot, something with QD levers is not a bad idea. But I'm not fully decided which one I like. So with ADM, I like their lever, but I don't like the rings, right? With LaRue, I don't like the lever or the rings. I just don't like that mount. With Bobro, it's actually quite nice. It's spring-loaded, so dropping at the zero may shift a little bit, but it's not too much, and for most applications, that's fine, and you should be checking zero occasionally anyway. The side lock I didn't like too much. It's nice and slick, but it was not my favorite. See what else? Help me here. What other mounts can you think of that with levers? Arms, I use it on my Alcan because I have to, otherwise I wouldn't. There are some mechanical issues with the arms mount. What else? What other mounts can you think of? Anyhow, so if you can think of any other mounts, if I've seen it, I'll address it. All right. It's been 2 hours. Wow. You guys are survivors. You've stayed here for 2 freaking hours. Wow. And I don't know what you're doing. I'm drinking here. I'm having fun. I don't know about you. Okay. Given that it's been 2 hours, I'm probably going to be wrapping this up. My voice is indeed going, and I need to go make sure my kids are asleep. They have school tomorrow. Any further questions? Going once. Going twice. Anyone at all? All right, I think I've put you all to sleep. It wouldn't be the first time. Oh, yeah. Friendly reminder. So the best rye that I've tried is, weirdly, made in California by it's called Refined. Unfortunately, it is only available through, to the best of my knowledge, through only one retailer called Wade's Wines in Westlake Village. And the only reason I know about this thing is that I'm really into single malt scotches. And the guy there who deals with tastings and all, this old guy, he was one of the founding members of a single malt society. And he also likes bourbons and rye whiskeys and all that sort of stuff. And they make a small batch of this stuff somewhere around Paso Robles area. And it's cask strength, so you need a little bit of ice in it, a little water. But it's probably the best rye whiskey I've ever seen. Honestly, I'm not that picky about ryes. I really like Whistle Pig rye whiskey, for example. And I think it's very good. There are a few others. By and large, every time I do a live cast, I'll have a different type of a whiskey. When I moved to New Mexico a year ago, I was very surprised to find a locally made in Santa Fe distillery that makes excellent Scotch Highland style whiskey. It is very good. It's called Colkeegan. Next live cast, I'll drag a bottle. I'll show you. All right. Anyhow, the name of the whiskey, Refined. It's in the comments. RE-FIND. refined. Okay. I'm officially out, so it's time to wrap up. Thank you all for sticking with me for 2 hours. I applaud your bravery and the fact that all of you probably have no life, but I appreciate it anyway. I'm going to wrap this up. The video is going to go live on YouTube shortly. If anything else that I forgot, please post in the comments and I'll reply the best I can. If you have ideas for other videos, same direction, put them in the comments and I will see what I can do. Thank you all and good night.